Good morning, everybody. It is my privilege and honor to introduce these phenomenal women in space that are moving things forward, creating change, and just in general being pretty darn amazing. So this is one way that I like to do it because I love hearing people's stories so much. So I would like to begin this morning with Joalda Morancy. I want to hear your story and what you're doing in space education and outreach.
Hi everyone, so my name is Joalda and I'm the Director of Operations at SEDS USA, and also I'm a science communicator and also an undergrad student at U Chicago. And so for now, I'm mainly doing science communication through Twitter and also to the general public, since I want to do my best to try to inspire other people along with the younger generation of students across the world and everything. So yeah, that's me.
And SEDS, it's like we will make sure if we want to make available for everyone, if there are students out there, how they can join. We had your friend George Sarkody on the other day on my education panel, so we want to make sure we're sending folks your way. All right, Michal Ziso, you're all the way in Tel Aviv, Israel. Tell everyone who you are.
Hi, everyone, and thank you again, Janet and Explore Mars, for this wonderful opportunity. And I would like to congratulate you on a truly one-of-a-kind virtual summit for so far. My name is Michal Ziso. I'm an architect, an entrepreneur, a public speaker, human equality activist, a futurist, and a proud space architect. I am the founder of Ziso, which is an international studio working at the intersection between architecture, innovation, space, and equality based in Tel Aviv, Israel. I love puzzles, so I specialize in the biggest ones I can find, which is skyscrapers and large urban projects, and recently also larger Martian settlements. And my approach to space architecture focuses on the human experience and performance from social, cultural, and human diversity aspects. And thank you again for having me here.
And next up, we have, let's talk to Emily, the space gal. I am sure, and I hope that you have seen her premiere of her Netflix show. So, Emily, probably you need no introduction. You are beloved by so many. Tell us who you are and what all you do.
Well, my name is Emily Calandrelli. On the interwebs, I am known as the Space Gal. I have a background in mechanical and aerospace engineering, but now I am a science communicator, and I do that communication on various platforms like TikTok and YouTube, and most recently, my Netflix show aired that I'm really proud about. Emily's Wonder Lab is now available on Netflix, and it's all about science and science experiments with kids, and I'm really excited about that. So I'm all about sharing my love of just general science, but also most particularly space exploration, because that has always been my passion.
And Emily also attended MIT, so that is no small feat either. So thank you. We're so proud of you. All right, Dr. Kavya Manyapu, tell us about who you are and what you do.
Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you for having me here with such amazing women and sharing the panel here with you, as well as sharing our stories with all of you out there. I work at Boeing on the Starliner program. I'm the spacesuit lead and also serve as our flight test director on our first flight tests. I've also worked on the International Space Station program, and I'm currently also an adjunct professor at University of North Dakota in the Space Studies department. And apart from my work, I also work on a technology for allowing spacesuits and habitats to function on the moon for long duration, taking care of the lunar dust. So that's part of my research hat I wear, and working at Boeing on the next steps for the lunar missions as well.
Congratulations. We can't wait to hear more about that. And last but certainly not least, Kellie, Gerardi, you're wearing, it looks like moons or something over there. I always love your fashion. Tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Thank you. Yes, moons. And thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on this panel. This is always my favorite conference. But I'm Kellie Gerardi. I've been in the commercial space industry for about 10 years now, in roles ranging from media and policy to business development and operations. It's been a wild ride. Wouldn't change a thing. I'm also a citizen scientist, so I get to test spacesuits and NASA-supported research in microgravity as part of Project Possum. And I've had the privilege to build a large SciComm platform, including Instagram and TikTok. I think one day I'll just retire and become a full-time TikToker. That would be great. But I'm really excited about my upcoming book. It's called Not Necessarily Rocket Science, A Beginner's Guide to Life in the Space Age. And I drive home that our next giant leap will require the contributions of artists, engineers, and everyone in between. So I'm really excited for our discussion today. Thanks again.
You know what? That is sort of really the best segue into one of my first questions. And Kellie, let's stick with you and then anybody join in. You submitted this, and 2020, no doubt, has been a challenging year for Spaceship Earth. How have recent events in just, the last 5-6 months made you think differently about the responsibilities of our industry and DEI?
Yeah, thank you. And I, like you said, would welcome everyone else on the panel's thoughts too, because it really is a timely topic. So for me, 2020 has really sharpened the lens through which I look at our industry. And I think my big takeaway is that, the contrast and the emotional dissonance between exhilarating space achievements and devastating earthly happenings, I think that's only going to increase as this decade unfolds. And we all know that space is critical, and we need to start preparing the public to grapple with that dissonance. But we also need to hold our own industry accountable, minimally for not contributing to it, but maximally for being agents of change, right? Bias, both implicit and overt, is a societal plague, and our industry is not immune. And if we think the gender breakdowns are bad, the racial disparities are like downright embarrassing in the industry. So it's not only an access problem, it's an experience problem. And I think the stakes are too high for any single demographic to be steering the entirety of Spaceship Earth. So those are my high level takeaways.
And Joalda, you submitted a similar question, and I would love to know your thoughts. You asked, what's that intersection? Tell us how, because I want to make sure that you are the future of space exploration. What do we need to know, and why is this such an important topic?
Yeah, so I have like tons of thoughts on this that I could go like for hours for, but I guess like kind of like what Kellie was mentioning, like as an industry, I feel like especially the past few months, like more and more people have realized like the lack of diversity in aerospace, for example, and like that like change needs to happen, and like this is something that's like that needed to be done like for a long time now, but I think it's important for like this industry to like make sure to realize why like the intersection of DEI is important, because like if we're gonna move forward as like this like a human race per se, but like only not include everybody, it I don't think you're really moving forward. You're just kind of like stagnant in a sense, and that like includes like including like more Black people, more POC, more by POC. Yeah, it's important to discuss this because like if we're like planning like for example a Mars mission, and you only have like white men on your mission, are you really like doing it for humanity, or are you doing it for a subset of humanity? So yeah.
And how can we help you as a student? It's like one of the things that I have been committed to for a long time is if somebody reaches out to me, it's like if I don't know them or can't assist, I do my best to create an introduction to somebody who might help them along that path. Is that something that is super helpful if for anyone, I suppose, but especially at this particular time?
Mm-hmm. So I guess for as a student, I've realized that like any like advice from like anybody who's like just like somewhat more experienced than me is like super helpful, and especially like role models I can look up to who like look like me is like super important. And yeah, I think just like if like I guess like if mentors or like anybody, like any of you guys, like if a student reaches out and like has like a like just a general question, just like I think answering that one question can like have a huge impact on them, because like I feel like it's really hard for like students to like get experience, like especially if they don't come from a background that has it. It's hard for them to get experience and like talk to people who's experienced in the field, because one, they don't really have access, and two, like it's kind of like daunting in a sense, because like I've definitely emailed like a lot of people and I've like lost my dignity along the way. But yeah, I think just like listening to students and like giving like as much advice as you can, because I think it'll go a long way for them in the future.
And this is, again, thank you, Joalda. We take heart to what you're saying and are listening. And Emily, you had some thoughts here. It's like that we know that even there are autonomous and technology that's been designed for light-skinned people, and there have been, assumptions over the years. It's like, I love your question. Emily wanted me to ask, why is it problematic to not have women play a role in a mission to Mars? And explain.
Yeah, so I like that line of questioning, because it changes the assumption from how do we bake women into the design to women should already be part of it. We are not some niche population. We are 50% of the population. We should already be a part of the design, and it's problematic that historically we've been removed from it. And this is the case for so many different industries. But with something like this, if you're designing science and technology to be used by everyone, then you need people with different backgrounds, different lived experiences at the table, in the lab, with decision-making power, right? Because that's important. Being able to decide how that science is done and how that technology is developed. And so historically, that's not really been the case in many different technology industries. And one example I wanted to bring up is in the car manufacturing industry. And this always blows my mind when I learn it, that in the US, it wasn't until something like 2011, 2012, where it was federally mandated that female test dummies were used in car crash safety tests in the car manufacturing industry. And that blows my mind, because, well, of course, when cars were first developed, it was mostly men driving them, mostly men in them. And so it made sense that they only used male test dummies to test their safety. But of course, that changed, and safety regulations just did not change with it. And even today, in the same car crash in a driver position with a seatbelt, women are 47% more likely to have sustained injuries than men. 47%. That is a huge health crisis, and the amount of money that we're putting into the research to understand why that is not proportional to the effect that it's having, in my opinion. And as you mentioned, there's other technologies that are prejudiced as well. So those optical sensors that you use in the bathroom for the automatic soap dispensers, those are designed, well, not by design, but they happen to see light-skinned people more easily. And so dark-skinned individuals have a hard time using them. And the problem is that these sensors are also some of the same type of sensors that some people are using in autonomous driving. And so we can see how that would be a problem. And so we want to make sure that these issues that various industries are currently having, we don't have these on a mission to Mars, right? Because when you're designing technology that is supposed to be used by a diverse set of people, then you need a diverse set of people at the beginning of that design phase, having decision-making power, influencing the design along the way.
And Dr. Kavya, I want you to say, I see some things here. You work for Boeing, but yet it looks and appears that some of these things that's new information to you, that what just Emily said. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And I mean, this was the first time I heard about, the sensors being made specifically to look at, light skin. I do want to bring in a little bit of, aspect and background from Starliner here, our next generation spacecraft. First of all, I'll begin with this. I'm so proud that we have 3 women on our very first initial flights of Starliner. Our first flight, crewed flight test, which will be our first human-rated flight test. We actually have Nicole Mann, who will be flying as a pilot, and I believe that's like the very first flight test in the history of mankind where a woman gets to play a role as a pilot also in a flight test. And on our first Starliner services mission, we actually have Sunny Williams commanding our spacecraft. And very recently, NASA has announced Dr. Janet Epps to also be part of the mission. So I'm really excited. And just going back into design considerations for the spacecraft itself, I mean, we are diversifying space exploration as much as, what I would like to say is that, in the past, we're moving away from manned spaceflight to human spaceflight, and that's how it should be, and that's how, our generation is growing up, and, we are empowered by, this whole diversity and inclusion, and we are competent enough to be part of this and be inclusive as part of this human endeavor. And so as part of Starliner design, we actually design a spacecraft to be capable of handling various dimensions. And for example, we call it the 5th percentile female to 95th percentile male, which basically means we are capable of accommodating a large to a smallest person. Our spacecraft is built, all of the equipment in there, from the cockpit to the spacesuits, etc., are accommodate various ranges of astronauts in there. So it's very unique to learn from Emily that here on Earth, where we are a diverse population, that the sensors and some of the technology is so focused on one sector of humanity. I'm just really surprised, but I'm really happy that within space exploration we are making giant leaps, and just knowing that we have all these role models who will be flying on our spacecraft, it's just very exciting. And there's a lot of work to do within our space industry, but I think we are taking those, we're making those steps.
Oh, Janet, I think you're muted.
I am so delighted by the women and the diversity that we're going to get to see go in space. I'm one of these people that every time I see a launch or a landing or a splashdown, I'm in tears, just going, yay, space. Now, Michal, I think this is the very Michal, there you go. I know you're in architecture. What are you doing to apply some of these kind of diversity, equality, inclusion things into your design?
Well, first of all, we have to understand that the built environment, our built environment everywhere in our homes, in our streets, in our cities, influences the way we behave and the way we even think. Now, we usually walk around and don't really think about the way our environment affects what we're doing, but I'll give you 2 examples for this. The one example is that when examining the urban behavior of women, we see a strong connection between the fear and a sense of safety to the lack of use or avoidance of certain parts of the city. That means that women choose to go through different streets depending on where they feel safer. They would maybe choose not to go through a park when they go home at night. And that means that the city actually causes some sort of imbalance or inequality in the way it treats women versus men. Another example, which I think is very, very shocking, there used to be a master builder in New York City. His name is Robert Moses, and he was known for his bridge work. And he was especially known for designing low bridges that will not allow buses to go under them. And why does that matter? Why does it matter that buses couldn't go under those bridges? Well, he put those bridges on the way to certain areas of the city where he wanted to keep out the minorities or the poor. And that way, or that's an example of something that is called discrimination by design. So what I try to do when I look at Earth and the architecture we have here all over the place, it was usually built a long time ago in times of maybe different social structure. Now, it's very, very hard to change things or infrastructure that we already have here. But when I look at Mars, that's a complete clean canvas. And it's an opportunity to design equally with diversity in mind and not make those mistakes, which are really, really hard to correct afterwards. So what I try to do is to have people or make people more aware of the effects of the built environment on other people and understand our own blind spots and the fact, as Emily said, that we need diversity to design for diversity. And sometimes it doesn't come from bad intentions. It just really comes from actual blind spots that we have of other people's experiences in the built environment. So as a space architect and a regular with gravity architect, I try to incorporate those ideas and that kind of thinking, and also through my public speaking, I try to raise the awareness of how much or how big of effect our built environment has on our lives and on our experience and behavior.
Janet, you're muted.
I want to listen so intently that I mute so that I don't make any noise in these amazing conversations we're having. Dr. Kavya, we've had a couple of great questions, and do you mind, Aaron and Tapaswini, do you mind directing some answers to those questions that you see there?
Yes, absolutely. I'm looking at Aaron's question here. Please discuss the way technologies are tested on diverse populations more specifically if you can. It's rare that anyone gets to hear about the details of these tests and the implications. So I'll give some examples on the Starliner program. So as I mentioned, our spacecraft is designed to accommodate various dimensions, gender, and anthropometric dimensions, like I just said. So what we do is, first of all, I'd like to put this down. Of course, we have to recognize the differences in biology. But when it comes to the functionings of the brain, we are, everybody, is equally competent. And so we designed the spacecraft such that we look at various elements such as workload and usability from a human factor standpoint, error, and we test with our astronauts, men and women, through the various scenarios that they are put into when they have to fly the spacecraft, both in a nominal condition as well as off nominal, and by off nominal I mean emergency conditions, etc. In fact, I led quite a few tests where we tested out astronauts through flying our spacecraft, if you will, on ground here, and have to go through a lot of human factors type of human in the loop tests. So most of those are pretty much designed very, similarly, because we expect and we know that somebody flying a spacecraft needs to have all the training as well as the knowledge to fly the spacecraft. I've also done a lot of spacesuit testing, and it's very similar, attending to an emergency, attending to cabin depressurization. We are looking at, the mental capabilities of workload and being able to multitask and things like that. Now, I mentioned about recognizing the biological differences. One area that comes into play is waste management, obviously. So I like to, to put it like for all the poo-poo and pee-pee kind of testing, obviously, we have to segregate that to ensure we are accommodating both men and women, and we test them appropriately. In fact, test and design appropriately. In fact, I was one of the test subjects in the early days of the design, where myself and another test subject who actually is our Boeing test astronaut had to test two different types of waste management systems for both male astronauts and female astronauts. And so that's where, we ensure we are accommodating, everyone be capable of flying the spacecraft. So I hope that answers your question. And actually, it's really fun. I do want to mention that, when I personally get work with people on my team and work with astronauts, I'm looking them as humans in general. I don't think about, because people ask me, how do you feel about working with men or women? For me, we are all working towards the same goal and vision. And so I just feel like everybody has such awesome talents and they bring so much to the table. There's no, specifically, and I mean it in a very positive connotation, specifically that, they're this gender or this gender. I'm working with humans for, a human spaceflight program.
And that is what all our hope is that it's all humans born under the same sky, made out of the same stardust, part of that grand unified starry, nebula, hearts of stars. Joalda, you wanted to answer. I have to tell you something. Let me call out Tapaswini Sharma. She's in India. I have known this brilliant gal since she was 14. Tapaswini is a Nobel Prize winner in the maker. I'm telling you, she's one of the brightest kiddos I know. And so thank you for taking her question. She is the future also of space exploration. So Joalda, would you do the privilege? And I see others would like to join in there, Michal and Emily as well.
Yeah, so this kind of ties into a question I wanted to answer later, which was like, how are you actively inspiring the upcoming Mars generation? So I guess like to give a bit of background. So like I grew up like pretty poor, like I was like low income and my family didn't like have much money. And so like I didn't really have any access to like going to like all these cool programs for kids or like space camp or like, like having general access to like knowing about like all of like the cool signs that might exist somewhere. And so like I only like started learning about space when I was 15 and I was like not like as 4. And so yeah, and I like didn't really have any role models growing up because that also tied into a factor of not having much representation in the aerospace industry, and like I didn't really like know of people who looked like me. So like I didn't like really choose to look up to anybody at that point. And so this kind of ties into like my like whole gist of what like I hope to keep on doing like throughout my life, and that's to inspire like young kids, specifically like young Black kids, to like have like a role model or have access to this information. And so that's something I've been like trying to work on. Like I try to speak to kids in the South Side Chicago and like present to them and talk to them about space and get them excited, because like I want them to like at least like be inspired by somebody, even if it's me, like a regular college student. But like I think like having somebody be able to come to your school and like talk to you about like a topic you never knew about is super important. So now to the question. This is like something I've been planning for some time now, and I'm lining it up with like a big, I guess, like follower point on my Twitter, but I'm trying to make these like, I guess, like space like care packages for these kids that I went to their school for. So like it kind of like consists of like books that they can read and also like some fun stuff like a water ball rocket and blah blah blah. And so like that's like a project I've been trying to start on, because I want kids to be able to like get excited about space because it's so important to me, but like also like have like the resources to do so. So whether that's through books or like fun projects or like just like fun stuff like stickers or something. So yeah, that's like something I've been planning on trying to do, and I'm hopefully going to raise money for it soon. But yeah, that's the project I've been starting.
Joalda, I have some fun swag I will give to you and make available, and give me your mailing address. So I'm on it, and I believe others would be too. Now, Michal, you had, again, questions are passing by so quickly. Kellie, Emily, Michal, anybody join in on some of these questions that are coming in, and then we're going to talk about motherhood. I know somebody dashed off to attend to a baby and how being a mom also plays a part in how we look at working in the aerospace industry. But as these questions are coming in, what do you guys want to add to what Joalda just said?
I would like to add, for me, it's not an instance of inspiration, more an instance of like a wake-up call that I had. I was living in New York a few years back, and I noticed I was working on the biggest projects with the most interesting people. But when I looked around, I always find myself to be the only woman in the room. And it kind of got me to think that maybe there was a connection between the way our world looks and how we experience it, and the fact that I always find myself to be the odd woman out, or the only person who is different in the room. And from that point on, it kind of became a mission of mine to question every single thing that I see around me. I stopped taking it as something that is a given, or just because that's the way it used to be, it's not necessarily means that that's the way it should be. And I'm kind of taking that perspective with me to space. And when I think about every single architectural building block, I tried to think about how it could be made in a different way to actually accommodate diversity of users. So right now I'm working on creating an index of architectural building blocks, or space building blocks. And it's really, really fun because a lot of things are completely different. For example, on Earth, doorways are measured or are built by height. So they're usually should accommodate the highest person. But in space, or let's say on the International Space Station, when we have microgravity, the passageways are actually determined by our width and not by our height. So that's an interesting thing to actually think about, how those actual building blocks can look. And it all came from that understanding that maybe things are not the best that they can be for us. So maybe the world is going towards an era of personalization with our phones and a lot of things that we're using, but also our homes, our cities, our countries, and also our life in space should also be personalized to specific needs. And I think that's a good thing to remember, to question everything that is around you, and to always ask if it can be better suited for you or for the people around you.
And, you know, again, there's this intersection of this personalization. There's this intersection of integration and inclusion. And then how do we do all those things at once? And I think for me personally, it's like I would proffer that for all of us to come to this conversation with some grace and go, yes, it should have been changed 50 years, 100 years ago, 400 years ago. There are things historically that, again, if you sit with it long enough, it's just you're in grief. But as author Ash says, start from where you are. And so I think I'm looking at the women that I believe that can be part of that change. Emily, you wanted to answer Brianne's question. Is like, do you think students moving to a remote environment have less access to engaging in relationships to space industry? And, you know, shameless self-promotion here. It's like Janet's Planet is going to partner with Explore Mars. We had industry talks every day, free of charge, with kids for 9 weeks. We're going to continue that in the fall and in the spring. And so we're trying to give that away. What's your answer to that question?
Yeah, I think the beauty of social media, I mean, assuming that these places have internet, which is not often the case. I am from West Virginia, and I know many places in West Virginia don't have broadband internet, although there are some policies in place to try to fix that. And coronavirus has brought this issue to light, like so many other issues. But I just want to sing Joalda's praises, because if you're not following her on Twitter, you absolutely should be, because she does these beautifully written threads on Twitter on various topics like time travel and Mars and wormholes, and some topics that you would just think are so complex and complicated. And she distills the information in such an easy and accessible and easy to understand way. And so she was talking about creating educational materials for students. And I think that those things that you've already created would be perfect mini lectures on these beautiful topics that people have heard about but maybe don't quite understand. And so anyways, I think that people in remote places, or students, or anyone who may not have access to education, if you can have access to Joalda, then you can have some really wonderful education there.
Beautiful. Let's talk about motherhood. Let's talk about motherhood. I know several of you are mothers. How do you balance that? We too often hear, oh, we can't have a lot of women in space. They're going to quit. And that's the problem with the pipeline. It's like women's blah, blah, blah. So what do you guys say to that? How do you balance motherhood, aerospace, and your endeavors? Who wants to jump on that? Dr. Kavya?
Sure. So I want to start by saying that, you know, we are gifted with such a great power. And even when I was pregnant, I would always call myself pregnant and powerful. I was pregnant last year. I have 11-month-old now. And, you know, we have the power of creating and nurturing the next generation and laying the foundations, the best foundations for them, and being their role models. So I take real pride in being my mother now, and I think I'm getting a little bit emotional. So I want to say that, you know, I had my little one right in between the midst of our very first launch last year. And up until 2 days before my, you know, my childbirth, I was actually working on a very major test on our program. And then I actually been on the program since we started with PowerPoint design. So it's been an emotional journey in terms of being able to literally have your fingerprints on the spacecraft. So I went on maternity leave, and in December we had our first launch. And I actually, you know, chose to cut short my parental leave to go sit as a flight test director and support our launch, which was both emotional as well as a proud moment as being a mom, to being able to do that. And I would also like to say that we are in the age, and I think we couldn't be in a better age and time with technology being very helpful. And if I may share a personal thing, I was actually able to wear wearable pumps and be on the in mission control, Boeing mission control, actually being part of the launch. So, I mean, it's, you know, being able to balance both of those, you know, with a little child at home and you know, a new mother, and being able to, you know, take your passion to the next level and be able to be part of that, you know, next big thing for humanity. And I continue to do that. Our company has very good policy, and I really feel lucky because we started having additional 12 weeks of parental leave after we are given our initial maternity leave, and we have the flexibility of using those 12 weeks until the kid turns 1 year. So I'm able to work through my parental leave and be able to support many of our major milestones that are currently happening on the program. And, you know, it's been very exciting, and our company has built that support structure from my managers to my team. And I have, you know, great support at home. And I also want to, you know, kind of give out a message, and something that has been personal to me and I've personally experienced is, I think empowerment begins at home. And I've seen that with my parents, you know, growing up with my family, with my husband now. And it's very, really amazing to see the same kind of level of support I've been able to get in my team working at Boeing.
Kellie, go ahead.
Yeah, so I that was beautifully said, Kavya, and I relate to so much of it. I have a 2-year-old daughter at home. Her name is Delta V, so very on brand always. But, you know, my experience was tough. I think I no longer believe in work-life balance, just to be blunt. I think it's work-work balance, and that's okay. You know, it's the path that I chose. But I will say it is hard. I missed every single one of her little milestones. I missed her first crawling. I missed her first walking. I missed her first word because I was on business travel or away working in the world. I've had to have support around the clock to be able to keep up, you know, a full-time job that's not a 9-to-5 is much longer than that. And I have had incredible support, but it really has taken a village. It's taken a nanny, weekend help, you know, assists from my parents, you know, and others in the community. And I only have one, and she's a toddler, right? So it's so hard. And the message that I think I want to communicate for this industry is like, we are held to a higher standard. You know, we have so far to go. If the space industry wants the world's trust and support in this quest to open up the final frontier for all of humanity, our workforce and our workforce policies need to more fully represent humanity. And we have to hold our leaders and our peers accountable for that. I'm thrilled to hear that Boeing has such a supportive and progressive stance here, because otherwise it's like if a visionary space company in our industry doesn't even have a thoughtful parental leave policy for their own employees, it's like, how do you expect me to trust you to engineer the future of humanity? It's like I become suspicious of the future that you want to engineer. And so I do think that we really need to prioritize this if we're going to commit to equity and inclusion and cultivating the broadest possible set of perspectives. You know, the last thing I'll say, and then I really want to hear from Emily on this too, because she's a rock star mom in space, is after a decade of whiteboards, war rooms, and rooms with no windows, I've learned that the people who are designing technology really have the power to influence how it's applied. And we exist in a high stakes, high tech industry of aerospace and defense. It's in everyone's best interest to make sure we're cultivating those broadest set of perspectives and novel approaches to complex problems. And that includes making sure that the childbearing half of the species is included in that from a policy perspective and from an experience perspective at work.
Emily.
Oh my gosh, when you guys are talking the entire time, I am just like clapping and snapping over here because you were just like wording this so well. So the only thing I'll add is that for the last 20 years, women have been outpacing men when it comes to going to college and getting college degrees. And as of 2 years ago, 49% of women noted that they were the breadwinners for their family. And of course, not all of those families are male-female households, but the majority of them are. And even though this is the case, women are still doing the majority of the household work, the majority of the childcare, the majority of the taking care of the sick and elderly of their family members. And the policies at work do not reflect this. We do not have more access to paid parental leave. We do not have access to more paid sick leave, any of that. And of course, we are one of the only developed nations in the world that doesn't have a federally mandated paid parental leave policy. And so there's a lot of things that need to happen at once to support people who want families, so especially support women who want families. There was a study done a few years ago that looked at it. I think it was 840 parents, and it saw that 40% of the women who had children, they left their full-time STEM career, or they went to part-time work, or they transitioned to a non-STEM career. 40% of women after their first child just left their full-time STEM career, and that was compared to about 20% of men. And so the area of STEM, this industry, and including the space industry, has a problem when it comes to supporting people who want families, particularly women who want families. And so Kavya mentioned this problem, we can start to solve it at home. I think one very important thing that has helped me is having a partner who does half the work, and at least half the work, and often more than half the work, many of the time, much of the time. And obviously, because we don't have a federally mandated paid parental leave policy, advocating for better parental policies at work is really helpful. And also, as a breastfeeding mother, when I was traveling around to different places when I was filming, there weren't always really good places to pump or breastfeed as I was traveling. And so at your workplace, making sure you talk to the people who are breastfeeding there, and figuring out a safe, clean place for them to do that, and working with them to develop those places can also be really helpful.
You guys are just amazing. And some of the last things in our final few minutes, I'd love a quick round robin if you could wrap two thoughts together. But before I do that, I just want to acknowledge all of our good, enlightened brothers and men of quality and integrity who do support and are trying and are starting from where they are and are making strides. I also want to say to our LGBTQ audience that we want space for you as well. So please come and let us know how interested you are. For me, Mars needs women, so that I know sometimes I was never able to have kids, but I always decided I would just adopt as many who ever crossed my path. And I think it's important that we as women take that mothering, natural nurturer that comes, kind of via to us in our DNA, and wrap our arms around the world and say, come in and you are welcome. Last thoughts as we go around, and Michal, I'll start with you. Why STEM and STEAM are important, and why Mars needs not only women, but everyone?
Well, I think that it's not only the just thing to do or the right thing to do. I think that diversity holds the key to innovation. Diversity is good for everyone. As my amazing colleague panelist here talked about motherhood. I am not a mother myself, but I'm thinking that it's not only to give the mothers what they need, it's also to allow the fathers to be at home with their children and to also be their role model. So I think when we talk about diversity, it's for the good of everyone. If we are working towards people who have differences of abilities and having them be part of the game, it's also beneficial for people with other abilities, or us as well. And I think especially in space, a lot of things that we do in space affect and influence our lives back here on Earth. A lot of times it is hard for us to conceive change for things that we are used to. And since space and Mars hold so many completely different set of restrictions or conditions, it encourages us to create very, very innovative and new ideas and projects. And we are forced to create things that are different and are new. And then afterwards, we can use those things back here on Earth. And sometimes if we just sit here and focus on what we're trying to do and try to make things better, it is hard for us. But if we just leave and go a little broader and leave outside and go to space, even if it's just with our minds, we can find those things that can have a lot of benefits for our lives back here on Earth. So I really do believe that, as a final thought, it's really for everyone, and space is for everyone. And we really have to continue and work really, really hard for STEM and STEAM, and the A stands for arts. And I think that arts has a big thing to do with space and everything good that is around us. So I think the work that everyone here on this panel is doing, and everyone around us in the industry are doing, men and women, is really important, and we should continue to do that. And really to create this amazing future that is equal and is also very, very productive and useful for all of us.
Yes, a community of support where we band together is certainly what is my goal. Joalda, could you answer those two questions? And I found out we've got plenty of minutes, and they want to keep hearing from us, so you go right ahead.
Yeah, so definitely what was said already, making space available for everyone who wants to be a part of it is like the most important thing that we can do. Whether like your skin color or whether you're LGBTQ or whether you're a woman shouldn't like prevent you from being able to be a part of anything that you want to be a part of, whether that's even like whether that's space or like really anything. Like going to Mars will be like probably one of like humanity's like biggest accomplishments. I'll probably say that, like one of like the best things we'll ever do like in this century. But it like there's so much that can happen in between now, like while we're preparing and getting to the surface, that we can do to like improve that feat and not have it be celebrated for only like a certain subset of people, but for everyone, for like entirely everyone. And I think like before we can even do that, there's a long way that this industry needs to go. Like I guess I'm trying to say that like the aerospace industry isn't only for white men anymore. That's like where we have moved. Society has moved past that point, and somebody shouldn't be like discriminated by what they look like. Like I shouldn't be discriminated by like what my name is or like how I look or like if I have like, for example, dreadlocks or anything. I guess like those factors shouldn't be taken into account when we're trying to work on like a mission that's so important for everyone, like not only just like people who are white, but like people who are Black, Hispanic, anything. So yeah, I guess those are like my final thoughts and something that I really hope to see as I like continue like my career and whatnot, that like there is some change and people are always actively working to make that change.
Joalda, you have my word that I am doing my best, and join with me. Join with me. Dr. Kavya, your thoughts as we close out on this panel?
Yeah, I would like to start by saying when we look back from a 300,000-mile journey, we are looking at our planet, our entire planet as a whole. And I totally believe, and I think it's a fact, that all of us are ambassadors of our planet. And if we are stepping into this next frontier for all of humanity, well, we better represent all of humanity going into space. And I also would like to, emphasize one thing. We here on our planet, we often end up focusing on limitations of being human, but just sit down and look back all of the immense possibilities we as a human can achieve. And space exploration is setting up that platform for us. And we are all in this together. So, I'm so proud of all the people who came before us, all the women who've been through the struggles and have set up these foundations, including I would like to include my grandmother and mother at home, who've been such role models to me growing up. We shouldn't take this for granted. We have long strides to make, and I think our generation is where we can make that difference and lay out those best foundations for future generations, where everyone, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, are provided equal opportunities, and there's equity, and we all represent humanity as a whole, especially in our space industry.
And that reminds me, a couple of years back at a Humans to Mars summit, I was tasked with doing education with a group of Girl Scouts. And so Jancy McPhee with Sci Art Exchange gave me this brilliant idea where they had to create a flag that we would plant on Mars, but the flag had to represent the globe, humanity as a whole. And I would love to share some pictures. I still have them. I printed out a few. One is called All in One and One in All, and it looked like a Venn diagram of this intersection of all people. It was one of my favorites of all time. Kellie, let me throw this question to you. It's like, why and who do we take in STEM and STEAM, which I know that you're such a big advocate for?
Yes, thank you. I love the question. I wrote a whole book on it because I can't stop talking about it. So yes, STEAM, as a non-engineer navigating the space industry, it's been critically important for me to internalize and then to communicate to others that you do not have to be an engineer or a rocket scientist to contribute to our next giant leap. In the introduction to my book, I draw comparisons to the Renaissance, where basically art was only one manifestation of this new way of thinking, but cultural innovation was apparent across all these different disciplines of medicine, technology, religion, politics, warfare, right? And similarly, engineering innovation is going to represent one small slice of the space age. It's an important slice, but it's a slice. This is a broader cultural movement in my mind. And I know that our next giant leap is going to require the contributions of artists and engineers and everyone in between. And I think, to touch on the second part of your question, Janet, about the future of spaceflight and what those demographics look like, one thing that I think is incredibly exciting is for the first couple hundred humans to venture into space, their flights have been focused entirely on function, right? It's on safety, it's on function, there's a mission. But for the next few hundred humans to travel to space, especially with suborbital space tourism, we have the opportunity to optimize on experience. you know, the next wave of space travelers isn't going to be all engineers. And that's a beautiful point. And I think, you know, my parting thoughts here are, if we are to survive as a species in the long term, then small elite groups of hand-selected and highly trained astronauts aren't going to cut it. We need to approach the problem with a more universal goal in mind, democratizing access for humans of all backgrounds and abilities, folks like us on the panel, right? And it's so exciting to see that happening as a business strategy. You know, look at Virgin Galactic. They're targeting folks who can afford tickets, who are likely to be a little bit older, maybe have more diverse medical histories than an average astronaut. So their operations are designed so inclusively because that's the market they're approaching. And I think that's what it means to democratize access to space, to design it not only for the smallest possible swath, but for the broadest possible swath of the entire human population. And I'm just so pumped to be alive in a space age to see it.
And we are so delighted that you are here with us. I always love that thought. It's like, you know, Da Vinci, he let his art inform his science and his science inform his art. And I've always been an advocate, as someone whose undergrad is in music and theater, that it's like, I don't know of a scientist who doesn't also play the piano or paint, or, you know, from Chris Hadfield to doing his graphic art and being a guitarist, to Fabiola Giannotti, leading CERN's Largest Hadron Collider team, is a fantastic concert pianist. So that's one of the other things. It's like, again, love your art, love your science. And again, so delighted. Emily, last words, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much to add. I just want to echo some of the sentiments that I absolutely love from my fellow panelists. I think that the space industry is one where we really should be setting the example. We are held to a higher standard, and we should be very thoughtful about how we approach space exploration for all of humankind. And I want to see that. Kellie mentioned Virgin Galactic. In the history of people who have ever gone to space, it's something like 565 people. Only 11% of those people have been women. And the vast majority of those people have been white. The vast majority of those people have been from the United States. They've been, old white men from the United States, and also mostly scientists and engineers. So that's a very specific slice of humankind that has been able to see our Earth from beyond our atmosphere. And they all talk about the overview effect. When you go to space, it changes your perspective of how you think about yourself and how you think about your role in the universe. And that is only offered to a very small portion of our population. And when these astronauts come back to Earth, it changes how they act as well. They often start foundations to help our planet. They want to be a better steward of the environment. They want to be a better neighbor to each other. And again, these stories that they're telling, they're only reaching a certain portion of the population, because we like to hear from people that seem like us. And so when we tell our own story, the people who are most likely to hear it are people that relate to us. And so if we can bring that message to more people, I think that will have a really positive effect on humankind. And so I think that the space industry needs to reflect that. And I want to see that in leadership positions. I want to see that in who we select to go to space, who we give that overview effect to. I want to see it across the board. And I think that the space industry can do that, because historically we have been able to push the envelope in many other ways. Why not this?
I couldn't agree more with all of your thoughts. And that is why we're having this conversation, to inform, to inspire, and to elicit some really great change. I'm going to do a few fun things. They've told me we do have a few more minutes before they have the next thing ready to roll. And these can be very short answers. And so I'll just, hop on top of each other. I want you to tell me your favorite astronaut. Or does anybody dare that?
Oh, I can go. Okay. My favorite astronaut is Michael Lopez Alegria. He was my first boss in the space industry, just record-holding former ISS commander, and also had previously held the record for longest EVA time. Amazing. But most importantly, he officiated my wedding, and that was just such an awesome thing for him to do. So he is a very close friend who I am privileged to know, and yeah. That's my favorite astronaut.
I don't know a lot of people who can say I got married by an astronaut. That's already like, that is so on brand that I like, that is perfect. That is so great. Anybody else have a favorite astronaut or role model? Dr. Kavya.
My favorite astronaut is Sunny Williams. I grew up in India half my life, and I heard about her, and growing up as a space nerd, it was really amazing to see a role model because she's half Indian, and that was something that really inspired me to pursue my passion on getting into space exploration. And now, several years down the line, I actually get to work with her, train her. She's also a really good friend of mine. I would also like to include another favorite astronaut, who is our Boeing test pilot astronaut, Chris Ferguson, who's been a great mentor to me over the last 10 years. And, it's just amazing to, I think somebody on this panel said, you need role models in the areas you want to work with. And, having that kind of role models really helps muster the courage to know that you can aspire to do the same.
I love that. Anybody else want to jump in on that question? Favorite astronaut or role model or favorite scientist? Anybody? Oh, I'm seeing you guys are. Oh, who's next there? Anybody else who? Oh, yeah. Sure.
I can go. I don't have a favorite astronaut. I have a favorite quote of an astronaut, and it's by astronaut Mae Jemison. And she said, don't limit yourself by other people's limited imagination, and also don't limit others by your own limited imagination. And I think that's a very, very powerful quote. And she is an amazing astronaut and an amazing woman, a woman of color. And I think that that's something that I kind of carry with me when I encounter other people's ideas and opinions and thoughts. So yeah, I really love that quote.
Joalda.
Yeah, it's I of course have to say Mae Jemison, because she's like always a good reminder that my dreams are possible, and because I want to, if possible, hopefully one day I can walk on Mars. And she reminds me that the sky
isn't the limit. One of the things that I've heard her say in a speech is that, growing up in Chicago, she can remember looking up at the stars. And if you haven't checked out her children's book, it's amazing. So Emily, any thoughts on that? Favorite female scientist, astronaut, anybody? Who's a role model?
It'd be so hard to pick one, but I have like a personal story from when I worked with Katie Coleman for my show, Exploration Outer Space. We flew on the Vomit Comet together, and I sat next to her as we were taking off on the airplane. And I'm a nervous person. I get nervous about a lot of things, and I was very nervous when we were taking off. And I sort of looked to her for reassurance, and she was so calm, cool, and collected that it made me feel calm, cool, and collected. And her energy is so kind and welcoming that it made me feel so comfortable in that moment. And so she is someone that I hold a special place in my heart for.
I want to say thank you so much to all of you. One of the things that I think too is a call to action for not only us, but for anybody else out there listening. It's time to give voice to some of these stories and people that we maybe do not know their stories. And it's also a call to action. If you want this pipeline and you are committing to diversity, equity, and inclusion in your organization, then you must stand up, be willing to mentor, be willing to listen, and to set aside some things of how we've always done it and start right now making those changes. It's like, I can remember a few years back, I gave a speech about that if you want that pipeline, you've got a mentor. And this engineer came up to me, and at first I thought he was being rude, but I realize now he was being quite vulnerable. So I want to honor that in him, is that he goes, I just don't know. So Joalda, the way that you have this amazing way of distilling this information that you go, oh, now I get it. Why didn't I have a teacher like you? Is that he admitted that he had a very hard time drawing that kind of like technical equation engineer brain of his into something abstract that could be relatable to the general public. And he almost walked away from our conversation. I encouraged him. I was like, there are ways you could take an improv class. You could maybe a creative writing class. But I saw him walk away a little bit saddened that we had not done a good job in education of giving him the benefit of learning how to think abstractly and dance your science, rap your science, write your science, and also learn all of those kind of like critical things. So again, guys, I praise you for what you are doing. Please let us know how we can follow and support. Many of these women have books, so please, it's like in a quick, we got it 1 minute left. If you've got a book, tell me about it and tell us where we can get it. Kellie, where's your book?
It comes out November 24th, and it'll be Barnes & Noble, Amazon, wherever books are sold. So it's called Not Necessarily Rocket Science.
All right, you, Emily, got several. They've even been read on the International Space Station. Where can we find your series?
Yeah, the Ada Lace Adventures, everywhere books are sold.
Anybody else? Well, I tell you what.
I have 2 TED Talks, TEDx Talks. One of them is called Equality Lessons from Mars, and it is TEDx Jaffa Women, and the other one is from the International Space University, TEDx ISU, and it's called The Surprising Things I Learned on My Journey to Become a Space Architect, and they are both on the TED official website and also on YouTube, also translated, I think, so far to 6 different languages, so you can find it over there.
Fantastic. Dr. Kavya or Joalda, any places that we can find you? We've got your social there. Any last words from you guys?
I guess there are a couple of podcasts out there and some videos on YouTube as well that Boeing and other Space Generation Advisory Council has produced. There's one particularly on Crossroads of Technology and Art that you could look at in YouTube, and Women of Marvel by Marvel Studios, where I had a podcast there. I think it's episode 155, if you can find that. And also a podcast for Women's Day at Space Foundation website, Space for You.
Joalda.
Oh, all my content is on Twitter, so.
You know what? We're going to change that. We're going to find you a publisher, and it's like you're going to put these good ideas in the books that you will then give away to all the kids that you want to affect. How about that?
That would be the ultimate dream.
Martians unite, baby girl. Martians unite. We are making way for all. And I think, what did you call that, Dr. Kavya? Women
of Marvel by Marvel Studios. And actually, I should also mention, you could look at Emily's show, Exploration Outer Space. Emily, I don't remember the season there. I think it was in 2015. I got to work with Emily on her show.
You know, I love our interconnectedness. All are welcome. And I think the way to end this amazing, beautiful panel is to say that I believe that all of you are women of marvel and awe and wonder. And I just want you to keep doing all that you're doing. And I'm blessed and honored to be in your presence. Go forth, live long and prosper. And again, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Janet.
All right, next up, we have something really beautiful from our friends with Sci Art Exchange, and it is called Sensing Space, and it is basically this beautiful intersection of art and science. And I just want to say so much that I think you'll enjoy this after our rousing conversation about how those things should be taught alongside one another. I ask now that you enjoy this presentation. Francesca and Ryan will speak on the themes of innovation, interaction design, fashion, and wearable technology. So they're just furthering this conversation. They're going to show examples from their company, and basically they're going to, my mind is blown. It's going to be the world's first wearable technology fashion brand that interweaves leading edge fashion design with emerging technologies and smart fabrics. Their fashions not only look beautiful, but carry within them magical capabilities and interactive connections. Watch now.